Fire, fire, fire. And it goes crazy. W, teach me. Okay, I teach you.
Take me to the moon where we both fell in love. My mind's awake, I feel so alive.
I'm going to be showing you how I made this edit. So the song I use is Take Me by Ian Asher, and I got the audio from AnyVortex99 on Instagram. For my first part of my edit, I have this transition where I zoom into the maps, and how I get these transitions, how I got my maps, I made a private lobby and I use my default accounts to record the parts that I want. So while recording my map, I just move forward into a straight motion, and then after I got what I wanted, I just go onto CapCut and added it as a separate project, and I add the parts that I want, and then I added a transition. The transition I used here is the pull-in transition, and then after that I just save it as a full clip. And after saving my video, I just go back to my edit and I add it to my edits. I also adjusted the speed on how fast or how slow I want it to be so that it can match the song. After that, my next part of my edit, this is where I zoom in onto standoff, and then I go up to the sky. This is where I add my gun. So how I add my gun is I go into Nuketown, and I use the blue house in Nuketown as like a green screen. So that is how I add my gun, and then I add it back onto my edit, and I add it as an overlay, and then I go to remove background, and then I use chroma key to remove the background. And then after that, my next transition, I have this part where my maps are moving like to the left, and they're all like moving like straight towards to the left. So to get this, I also go back to CODM and then to my private lobby. I record my maps and then I move to the right. So moving to the right actually makes it looks like my map is going to the left actually. Anyways, I do the same thing and I add it as a separate project on CapCut, and then I choose the parts that I want, and then I just add a transition again. The transition I choose here is a slide transition, so this is how the maps have like a really smooth slide so that when they move past. And then I save it again as a full video. I go back to my edit, and then I also adjust the speed on how fast I want it to be, and then I just duplicate it if I want it to be like a longer clip of the maps moving to the left. So I just duplicate my maps, and then after that my transition goes to my character. So I just recorded my character on standoff. I just moved around her, and it was kind of hard for me to figure out like how I want to move, how I want the camera to move, but I just kind of did it really quick. And then I like the way how I move backwards from her, and so this is where I also added my forward transitions from the beginning just back to the end. I just reversed this, so this is where the map is just going out instead of going in. So from the first part is going in, and then I just added to the end, and then the last part is just I just reversed it and I was just going backwards. I add the effects. So how I add the effects to my gun is really easy. So I just go to my gun and then I go to effects. The effects I used here is actually the play pendulum. This transition is like a swaying motion, so my gun is like swaying a bit as like it's moving into the sky. So after I do that, since I can only add one effect to my video of my gun, I have to go back into the main edit, and this is where I add more effects. So I added a glow effect to my gun. I just added it as an object, and then I'll just put the object as my gun overlay only. So this is where the glow is only on the gun, so it's moving and glowing. My captions that I use. So I was going to use the captions that was on CapCut. I was gonna use the captions that was on CapCut, but I didn't like how, because there wasn't like, I wanted my captions to be like clear so it looks more smooth. So instead of doing that, instead of using the fonts on CapCut, I just went onto this app. This app is called Adobe Fresco. So I ran this app, Adobe Fresco, and then I just used the fonts in here, and then I did white and black so that it can have like a shadow effect or whatever. And I just duplicated it, copied it, and then colored one black and colored one white, and then I saved it as a PNG. So this is how it's like a clear background, and then I added it back to CapCut. So after adding it back to CapCut, the reason why I did this is because when I add it back to CapCut, I can use the splice, what is this thing called? Well, I can use the splice thing. So the splice thing, it has like, it blends into the background behind. So I used overlay for my white fonts, for my white captions. So it goes to Take Me To. And then the animation, I also add animations. I did bouncy rush for each of my fonts, for each of my caption. And then for the Fell in Love part, where it goes on top of my gun, I actually used the fonts on CapCut, because CapCut also has these fonts that are like, they're like really flashy. So I use the template coming up, and then I use the effects. And the effects I used here, I think I used yellow, and I just chose one of these effects, and then so that it can like match the gun. And then I did the same thing onto the last part where it says Awaken I Feel. I just did the same thing there, and then to make my caption match with the movement of my gun, I used the diamond. So the diamond is where I move my gun in a certain direction, and this is where I would want my gun to be, as this is where I want my caption to be. As the gun moves, it follows the gun. And then I add a diamond for each part that I stop at. And then I also did the same thing for the last part where it says Awake I Feel. The filter that I use. So the filter I use for the whole edit, the filter I used is 4K. And then I also just adjusted the brightness, contrast, saturation, brilliance, and sharpened it. That's how I made this beautiful, wonderful edit. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, leave me down in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and bye!